Welcome to People Are the Point. I'm your host, Mark Concannon. Let's talk about the people. Hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Mark Concannon, for People Are the Point. Today, T.C. Riley joins me. He's a data advocate for the purpose of telling the story and helping people improve their lives. Very passionate about care, father of three, and longtime Texas resident. Enjoy the show. Thanks for joining. Beginning, can you talk to me a little bit about what drew you to that and what's rewarding to you about the data?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my entire career has been in this space. Weirdly enough, I fell in love with this world originally thanks to a freshman year in college professor who introduced us to the power of Excel, and not just what you use Excel for on your own, but like look at what VBAs can do and look at what all this sophisticated stuff can do. And I fell in love with the information management aspect. So very naturally, once I entered the professional realm, realized like, hey, there's a whole industry around data. I love numbers. I was always a big stats guy and numbers guy. Econometrics was really a specialty in college, and realized that like all this is pointing towards analytics. And the reason I love analytics so much is the ability to provide alternative angles, to provide additional information, to provide insights that your gut can't. Every decision-making process, there's a human element that's very critical. It's very important. It's never to be ignored. But the more you can support and understand to provide additional context, educate yourself better so you make better decisions. That's what I love about data. I do this stuff in my personal life, just about everything that I do. And then obviously it translates over into the career side of things wherever I have the opportunity.
That's exciting. But in the end, your passion, you enjoy the data, it's insightful, but your passion is the people. So talk to me about
Passion's the people.
mentoring and leadership. Yeah,
Yeah,
talk to me about that.
absolutely. Yeah. I say that data is my job and leadership is my career. Is a line I've used a couple of times before because I've been fortunate enough just about every stop along my career journey to work my way up from maybe like an individual contributor level, entry level at the beginning to leadership positions, manager, director, VP levels. And what I realized through that jump, that's what everyone tells you you're supposed to do. Keep doing a good job, keep moving up the ladder. The paycheck never hurts the fees usually when you go up and all that. But what I realized as I started to do that, and this actually back at my first stop at NCT Data, I realized this when I first became a team lead. It's not the administrative element of being a leader that I love. That's fine. You got to do what you got to do. I still like doing the actual work itself, but what I love is helping people. My biggest driver in life, personally, professionally, everything is helping. My cup is filled when I am helping others reach new heights, achieve new goals, get new capabilities. And as I became a leader and working with people, it became more and more apparent, something that's been taught to me from my grandfather when I was a child, that nothing really matters in business and careers in the world other than people. Yes, there are processes that are important. There are elements there. There are lots of other things that, are prerequisites or kind of bars you have to clear. But at the end of the day, if you want to understand the success of any organization, this could, usually that's a business professionally, but you could expand that to charities or even friend groups or whatever the case may be. People make the difference. The people matter. And a lot of people, I'm still one of those people, I believe people are inherently good. There's a lot of good people in the world who want to reach that next level, who want to do more, want to do better. And I've been fortunate enough, again, a lot of times in my career to be able to be in a spot where I can help be a vessel to make that happen, to guide people, to help them learn from my mistakes. That's the biggest thing. I am the furthest thing from perfect. I have walked into so many walls and messed up in so many ways. If I can share that and say, hey, there's a trap door there. Be careful. I've walked through it 6 times now. You think on the 7th one, maybe I'll stop, but hey, maybe you can even get ahead of it and not do it once. And just watching folks be able to grow and develop skill sets, especially as we translate this back to the data world. One of the big elements I always see this in is communication abilities. Folks in my industry, in my world, and with our skill sets tend to be, maybe it's a stereotype, but in transparency, I've also kind of see it play out in person, tend to be a little more not on the communicative side. We'll just leave it like that. That doesn't, communication isn't typically a strong suit of data scientists and data engineers and folks in this world. But by far the most successful people I've ever worked with in this field, their number one skill is communication, that ability to talk, to reach people. And whether that's on a personal level so that you have the relationships necessary to identify the opportunities and really work, again, back to people, working with those people, if it's the ability to communicate effectively through the data lens and being able to break down something incredibly maybe complex and sophisticated with all these layers, break it down for non-technical stakeholders so they can truly digest it. That's what separates people. So my ability to effectively communicate with people helps me help them communicate more effectively. And being able to see that and be able to play a tiny, tiny piece in different journeys from former and current employees and how they're able to grow is by far the most rewarding element of my career, of everything that I've done.
And that's a really good point. So much of what you're trying to do with the data is paint a picture and tell a story. And then if you can't
Absolutely.
communicate that story
Doesn't
to
matter.
your audience, you've missed the point. Yeah. Yeah, that's
I've
really
seen
good. Well,
some of the most sophisticated work ever that in my career has gone to total waste because we missed that last point. You couldn't get the
you
right people to understand it. So, got to make it happen.
see the story was very clear in the data. Yeah. Well, you mentioned your grandfather, which reminds me of my father, who's turned 82 recently. So I think this ties to what you're currently doing with data.
Mhm.
I'm going through this very difficult process of trying to figure out how do we make sure he's cared for? What are the next steps when he can't care for himself anymore? Where am I going to
Yep.
put him? How do we pay for all this? So I think right now, your current organization, you're using data to help people like me with these problems. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I'll touch on what I work at a company called CareLoop, which is based in Richardson, Texas. I'm here north of Dallas. And I'll tell you briefly what we do and then how the data ties in with that and so much of what we do there. So at the highest level, we provide caregiving services and we're a benefit provider. So we typically partner with, you have your health insurance, you have vision, dental. Sometimes you have these additional other benefits. Some of the common ones, there's a lot of fertility ones out there you see these days. You see things like Hinge Health for joint health, kind of in this point solution area. What we do is holistic caregiving services. And what that means is if you are someone who is helping other people, we are here to help you. Getting back to that help again, I knew I was at the right company when the word help is twice in the description of the company. And what we're able to do through that is we have a team of coaches. We have both digital solution and concierge services that provides a lot of support around these tasks. So let's talk through your situation. Elderly parent kind of getting to a point where they need some assistance, our most common use case, the thing we see the most often. And there's a lot of things that go into that. You don't know what you don't know in this world. Like you generally know, Mark, you're a smart guy. So like, all right, there's a fight. There's a financial element here. There are potentially some legal elements here. There are some, we'll call it location based or, situation based things in terms of where is he going to live, the kind of support. And then there are some like maybe help based things in terms of specific tasks and things that he'll need help with. All this, but you're not an expert at how to solve this thing. You don't have an elderly parent until you've had an elderly parent. And so what our coach would be able to do in your situation, they'd be able to do things like identify all the care centers in the area where you'd like him to live in terms of both maybe in-home care, but also in terms of like houses or, communities that he can move into. We're going to help you walk through that process, understand what's available. We're going to call and screen all those places. We're going to make sure they have availability, set up tours if you need it, help you get in contact with the right people. We're also going to support you on the financial side, understanding what are dad's finances like that plays a piece in this decision. Maybe there is this great solution, but if it's not in the cards financially long term, okay, well, maybe we need to consider alternatives, legal, you name it. We're going to provide all those services. And that's what we do is, again, to help you so that your time and efforts can be focused on your dad, being a person, being a human, connecting with him, helping him how he needs help from you as a son, not necessarily as a caregiver or as, as someone who's doing all these functional things for him. You can just be a person. And so the way that we do this is, again, I mentioned those different services, but a huge piece of what we do also is driven by information and analytics and data. And I use those interchangeably. A lot of people think data, they just purely think data is information, many forms, qualitative, quantitative, a million different ways to go about it. It's information. And what we're able to do is the more information we have and understanding, we've helped tens of thousands of folks go through these situations, patterns arise. We're able to identify things that when someone is going through, again, someone comes to us, I need to find like a nursing home for my dad, something like that. I know from the data, all right, there's going to be some legal questions. There's almost always, will updates and things like that and finalization at this point. There are financial considerations, including how this overlaps with things like Social Security and Medicare, the government ecosystem that kind of ties in with that age as well. And we're going to be able to serve those things up so that, again, you don't have to worry necessarily about, okay, I know I did this with that. I'm sure we're going to have to figure out money. We're going to say, hey, we got this place figured out. Typically, just so you know, within about a month or two of folks doing X, they're going to also do Y. So we're here to help with Y. Here's some educational materials. Get ahead of Y for you. When you need that help, we're here. Let us know. And do things like crafting what we call caregiving support plans. There are these journeys that we typically see people go on. Again, childcare is another big one. We just had our first little guy start kindergarten a couple days ago. I opened up a case and we have a plan for that of like your kid starting school, like, big kid school as we call it, for the first time. What does that look like? And just from the educational materials, I didn't even need to talk to anyone in this instance. It was literally just like some pre-populated materials that they knew that I would need based on the minimal information. I felt a lot better. They gave me some techniques around we've had some rough drop-offs the first couple of days. We don't necessarily want to get out of the car. Not that uncommon to kindergartner. My initial instinct is, as a parent who loves your child dearly, is to waver between, being the tough guy of, suck it up, get out there, kid. I'm, the dad, the traditional dad role you're supposed to do. But I'm a softie. And so there's also the piece of me that wants to say, let's just go cuddle in bed all day. It's okay, buddy. And knowing I can't do that, they gave me these helpful coping techniques about how to, like, talk about these things in words and ways that he can understand, and potentially, incentivize him in different ways and capabilities. So anyway, all of that comes from that information. It comes from the data, the ability to identify these things, to pull out using, again, the technology we have today is incredible with AI tools. Everything that's coming to our platform, we're able to run through these sophisticated language models, and it's able to tell us the story behind the story. What's the sentiment? Is it, how stressed is this person? Caregiving can get really, really stressful. If we see these flags that someone is under a lot of duress and a lot of stress as they're going through this, how can we be even more proactive? How can we get even more in front here? Sometimes people just need a resource when they need it. Sometimes you kind of need someone to come take your hand and guide you there and say, hey, I know you're kind of in the fog of war. You got a lot going on. Here, I'm here for you. Let's do this. And data can tell this whole story. So it's awesome to see, not to mention obviously all the tangential elements in terms of how this plays out in terms of an employer population, looking at like a value engineering side of things, looking at an impact, understanding how this changes the healthcare ecosystem around these folks and healthcare spending and all that. There's so much information, there's so many numbers. The limitation is how many different things we can try to tackle all at once, because there's so much out there to do.
Well, you just opened up something I keep thinking about care, and I think about seniors because that's a big piece of what we're starting to do more of is senior living, and
Yeah.
obviously my father. But that's a good point. Also, you're saying it can help you with transition into kindergarten. It can also help you with maybe a parent fighting cancer. It can help you with any time you're trying to care for somebody in your life, how to navigate the steps.
And caregiving to me, this is something that was cool, because I'll be transparent. When I came into CareLoop originally, I wasn't even 100% sure what caregiving was. It's like, I mean, you generally understand this encompassing term. Yeah, it's okay. It's helping other people. Again, that's good. But I wouldn't have flagged myself as a caregiver. I just wouldn't have. Because again, like in my head, a caregiver is either I have like a maybe disabled relative or an elderly parent. That's what it comes to most people's mind. But yeah, no, I have 3 little boys, and thank God for them. My wife's the primary caregiver, and she's the one that steers them. I don't lead them too far astray. But obviously, we're both there to support them and help them. And that is a caregiving situation. That is a journey. That is understanding how they grow and develop. Again, they know the old adage of there's no playbook for how to be a parent. Even though it seems like everyone tries to write a self-help book that tries to solve that, there's still no perfect playbook. Each kid's different. So those are all caregiving journeys. I had 2 unexpected ones in my life pop up last year. I had a good friend with a mental health crisis that I was put in a primary caregiver role I never saw coming. Wasn't ready for it. If it weren't for that support and service, and like, I'd never navigated, PTSD from the military and mental health issues. Like, it's not something that's ever touched my life until the day that it did. And I really needed to learn quick. And my wife had some medical issues. She lost hearing in one ear, kind of randomly one day and stuff like that. It's this whole new world of how do you co-parent, and how do you work with your partner who's going through this very significant change after 30 years of life. One of the major senses all of a sudden takes a left turn. And so there's so many situations that people don't always identify. But again, it's once you understand the holistic picture of it and realize we're helping people a lot more maybe than we always give ourselves credit for. But especially folks who are inclined to help are probably helping in many pots at once. And it's not just specifically my elderly parent, or again, if you have a child with, like autism, or you have this situation, very specific things you probably think of. There's a million things that we do every day to help others. Helping your neighbor out. You have an elderly neighbor, and you just, you take the paper up for him once a day, or whatever the case may be. They're all elements. So that's what CareLoop's here to help. And again, I'm able to then, from my data side, collect all this information, piece these kind of massive webs and puzzles together, and try and find these little like hidden pieces of information, these hidden signs to help drive our team. Again, at the end of the day, I'm not the one helping them, but I can help our coaches and our product team is developing our platform serve those folks better. And again, it goes back to the helping element. If I'm not helping my team accomplish their goals and do that, I want to be helping all of our members and all the folks they're doing be more successful. And again, at the end of the day, focus on the people, not focus on all the junk that comes with this.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Well, you'd mentioned how much you enjoy mentoring people and leadership. Now you have a kindergartner that you've got a life ahead of you of mentoring them, as you joke about not leading too far astray, but that definitely comes into our world. What are your thoughts on how you're approaching parenting that's different than, of course, mentoring grown adults? Like, what are your thoughts there on what you're doing different?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's obviously, yeah, being a parent, and we got two other little ones behind him. So we got our guinea pig, luckily.
Yes.
But it's the caregiving situation actually remarkably similar when you think about the elements, because again, there are these major pillars of any caregiving situation or any situation like this of the emotional side of things, physical well-being, transportation, financial elements, and things like that. These pillars don't really change situation to situation. The element, the specifics of them and what you're doing and how much or little that comes into play does. But there's a lot of these similarities, and we've actually seen, again, like from a data perspective, these patterns of how people go on these caregiving journeys, and they're very sinusoidal journeys. This caregiving is typically very submarine. It ramps up, you have periods of lulls and stuff. It's remarkably similar regardless. I could almost wipe out all the details of like who are they caring for, what is the situation, and you'd almost constantly see the same map forming through the educational element of you need to understand what you don't understand. You need to learn this stuff. You then move into more of the functional, okay, how do I apply this knowledge to this situation in terms of like a task-based approach? And then eventually following up with continuous support. Like once you get over, again, like educate yourself on what it means with dad getting older. Okay, identify that we need to get a home and then we need to do some work on the will or something like that. And now that we've done those things, what does it look like as a steady state moving forward? How is your life different now if dad moves into a home? Like how does that impact things? What do you need to keep an eye on? And all those same things I just said, you could almost align with my kid going to kindergarten in terms of learning what I don't know about, having a kid enter like this kind of school for the first time, identifying these specific things with socialization, and then like the educational kind of, like we start reading more at home, and we know our letters and numbers, da, 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 da. And okay, now that we're in this steady state, once we get through this adjustment period, what's it like for him? How do I continue to grow and mentor him? Because the caregiving is a marathon, not a sprint. And so learning that it's a marathon is the first piece. Understanding how to run a marathon. Side note: don't ask me about running a marathon. The last person on the face of the planet you'd want advice from that on. But and then how do you maintain that? How do you have the discipline, you could almost call it, around maintaining that schedule? So it's remarkably similar across all the situations. And again, when if you put them behind a veil or kind of the blind comparison, it's always shocking to me, honestly, looking at our information, how similar all these things are.
That's interesting. Well, to shift gears a little bit, you mentioned you're not a runner. Obviously, with three kids
Not
at home, it
around.
probably doesn't leave you a lot of free time. But what do
Yeah.
you do in your free time? What is it that you like to find that rewards you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been a big sports guy. That's one of the biggest things that I do. I love watching sports, love playing sports. Was headed to UT to play football until a back injury stopped that. But anything sport related, if it's an athletic competition, Olympics that just wrapped up, one of my favorite times of the year, because I get
Right.
to watch kayak cross and these sports that I did no idea existed. But I'm like, that's cool. If it's an athletic competition, like I'm there to cheer someone on. If my team, country, whatever isn't in it, I'll find one to root for. But so love doing anything like that. Obviously, you mentioned most of my time spent with my kids. My number one job is dad. I have this data thing I do, and I lead people, and I help. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like, dad's number one job, so doing that. And one of my favorite like personal hobbies and passions, love golf. Big golfer, as much as I'm
Okay.
able to. Obviously, the last 5 6 years, a little tougher to get out. I can't just say, all right, I'm out of here on Saturday morning without facing some serious wrath when I get home. But getting them into that's actually been a fun thing. So the two older ones and I go to the driving range about like every other week. We switch off with one of them and stuff, getting them into the 5 year old and the 4 year old, getting them into it. So that's always a lot of fun and a lot of passion. And I guess the last thing I do on my connection was kind of see it in the shirt. I'm a space junkie. So
Okay.
anything with deep space, theoretical physics, I know, a wild departure from sports and
Wow.
golf, but I'm someone I've always been told my head is always in the clouds, and so maybe I just keep looking up there. I don't know. And anything related to space and understanding our place in this universe, and the concept of we are one tiny little marble in a big old sea of emptiness and stuff with a bunch of other marbles. It's just really cool to me. It's not as scary or like daunting or overwhelming as it is to some people. I think it's awesome that we're just a tiny little cog in this wheel. Um,
Well, and so
and
much of space exploration relies on the data and the map, which is right in your
Absolutely.
wheelhouse. So that makes
Absolutely. Yep.
sense.
Yep. And I can't necessarily do all the math that the folks that really good at this do, but I can appreciate it and learn from them again. And I can educate myself and find out new information all the time. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, and that's great. I know my grandfather got me into golf when I was like 7, and it ends up being a lifelong capability, something you can always share with others, and it's a fun skill to have.
capability and skill are you're probably giving. I don't think you've seen me swing a golf club. I'm not sure those are the words you'd use. Like liability might be a little more but to be very clear, I said I love golf, never said I was good at golf, but it's just so relaxing. It's one way I like to connect with nature. Again, I can't necessarily go on the hunting and fishing trips I did as a kid and have all that time and stuff, but I might be able to get out there for a few hours, clear my head, and just focus. The focus it requires is something that's nice for me. Again, having little kids, having work and stuff all the time in our lives, and, even with phones, social media, you have just stuff in your face all the time. Your brain's just constantly running at 100 miles an hour trying to keep up with everything. It's the one place in the world I can go where all that background noise just fades out. It's just quiet. Just hear the wind blowing, hear the birds, feel the sun, feel the thorns as I'm wandering through the woods trying to figure out where my golf ball went.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So and like you said, and there's a geometric element to it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm that geek who's sitting here like, okay, if I had this much loft, how's that ball going to come down and stuff like that? I'm sure I annoy some playing partners sometimes. I don't actually, I have the perfect shot in my head. I've calculated the perfect trajectory. Now it's going to go 30 degrees this way more than I wanted and 40 yards past the green. But hey, I knew what I wanted to do. That's the first step.
That's great. It's very exciting. Well, one last question. Again, maybe with the kids,
Yeah.
it's hard to get the time. Do you have a favorite restaurant or any recommendations? If you're in that neck of the woods outside Dallas.
Yeah, so anyone down here, I'm a Texas boy through and through and stuff, and so the only answer here is Texas barbecue is my
All
go-to.
right.
That's a favorite food, and so a couple of the popular places around DFW. If you're ever here at the lunchtime, kind of in the middle of DFW area, there's a place called Cadillac that is probably the best brisket I've had in my life. It is one of my go-tos. If you're a little bit more up north, kind of closer to where we are, if you're in that McKinney, Plano, north of Dallas area, Frisco, there's Hutchins Barbecue, which is an amazing thing, kind of not too far from the Frisco Tollway area and all that. But realistically, if you're coming in this area and you want food, like if I want food and I have anywhere, I'm going to find one of those closest barbecue places. There's a million of them. Yes, those might be the two best, but it's hard to go wrong. And so that's a great thing. Again, something that I appreciate the patience, the focus, the time that goes into creating those while also having it's something that takes 14 hours, but I can also sit around for 13 and a half hours drinking beer most of the time. Like nothing is perfect. It's that slow build up, the focus, attention, but also relax and have a drink and take
Yeah.
it easy. Like it's the perfect meld of all the
Yes.
things that I love. So
That's perfect. I love it. Well, thank you for the time today. I really appreciate us being able to chat a little bit.
yeah, absolutely, Marco. I had a great time chatting. Happy to come back anytime, and it was great to speak to all of you. Yeah, watching here today.
Well, I'll see if we can't fit in some golf sometime soon. Appreciate the time.
I would love that. Would love that. Thanks, Mark. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you.